Um, okay, yeah. Hi, Ujaval. I'm really glad to have this conversation with you. Thank you, and it's been really an honor to talk to you about QGIS. I've been following your Twitter, I've been following you on LinkedIn and YouTube for a long time for QGIS and related stuff. And I think today's topic is we will be revolving more around QGIS, how exactly we can use this, because I remember when I started my journey as a developer, I saw that so many people, and I still see them today, that they're using these paid softwares to do a very basic things. Like the reason when I talk to them is like, first thing is that this is something that they have taught, either at a school or at their office, and then they never thought that maybe QGIS can do it. So let's start with that sort of conversation. That can you walk me through some of the wild possibilities of QGIS that people think that it's simply not possible. We'll have to use paid softwares like FME or ArcMap, ArcGIS Pro. So do you want to give a brief about that?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, thanks for inviting me. Really nice being here and talk about QGIS. Always love talking and spreading the awareness about what QGIS can do. And you are correct. I think that there's still some misconception. And the reason I started working on QGIS and publishing a lot of my material is because in the early days, this is about 15 years back, when I used to talk to people, hey, QGIS is so great. And they said, no, but we are taught using ArcGIS, or we are taught
Exactly.
using other software. And even I talked to professors, they said, we don't have labs, we don't have material that we can teach our students, because all the commercial providers, they give you the books and they give you all the labs for them. So that was my kind of motivation to say, if I want to spread QGIS and have people adopt it, we need open learning materials. And that's
Correct.
the reason I started. And even till today, I sometimes face the resistance, like, can QGIS do this, and how is it better, or what are the possibilities? So yeah, maybe I can talk to you about some of the kind of interesting things that QGIS can do, which other software may be able to do. It may be harder in other software, or simply not possible. So maybe if I can just share my screen.
Sure.
Yeah. So one of the kind of cool features of QGIS is that we have this thing called processing toolbox. This is something that holds all your processing tools, all the algorithms that you use to process data. So all the kind of analysis software that you want to do. And this is literally hundreds, if not thousands of tools available. And people don't realize, if people have been, checked out QGIS maybe 10 years ago, they say like, oh, I didn't find this tool, or I didn't know this. So it can do all of the things from basic clipping and projections to things like network analysis, things like raster processing. So I want to show some of the tools that people don't really know that exist. So
Just before we start, for example, if I download QGIS, most probably I will not see processing toolbox on my right side. Like I know that okay, there are menus, a menu bar at the top, but okay, from where can I find this processing toolbar?
yeah, so the processing tool comes built in. So you just have to open this from the processing menu and open the toolbox.
Ah, okay,
And this is what you'd use if you're, or any project, when you're doing analysis, you're doing data cleaning, data processing. You can also put this in a workflow. You can run it as a batch process. You can run it through Python and so on, right? So that allows you to say, once I figure out how to do this using my toolbox, I can then take it and automate that same workflow.
nice, nice.
So let's just get some base maps. I'm just going to load some base map. This is just OpenStreetMap. And what I want to do is, one of the things you can do is bring in photos to QGIS. So all of us have smartphone cameras. We've been taking photos. Most smartphone cameras will have this setting turned on where you will geotag your photos.
Yeah.
So if you just download your photos from a smartphone, you can actually bring them into QGIS. So let's just say this. I went on a trip recently and I took some photos, and I want to see them as a map. So there's a tool called import geotag photos, and in toolbox you can just search for things. So I search for this. It says show me where your photos are, and here are my photos. Here are some photos. This is just regular photos taken from a smartphone camera, and I run. And I said run. Okay. And it uses the metadata and geotag information from that, and it creates a map. So you can see I have got some points here.
Oh, okay. So it basically just created a vector layer
Yes.
out of that.
It created a vector layer directly out of my photos. And you can, if you look at the attribute table that it came out, you can see it's got the file name, directory.
Okay.
It has also pulled up other metadata such as altitude, if your GPS is tagged
Wow.
that.
Okay.
Some apps or even some phones will also save the direction of your compass. So I used an app called Open Camera for doing this on Android. On iOS, it just saves it by default. So we have the direction where I stood and clicked the photo. So if I want to visualize that as well, I can say there are other tools. So for example, there is a tool called wedge buffers, which will give you a view cone of of certain angle. So let's say I want to use this tool and say, what is the azimuth of your view cone? And I can say, take this from my metadata for each point,
Direction.
right? And say I want to have a radius of degrees this much. You can also use meter if you represent it. Now, if I click run, you can see I now have view cones
Oh, I
showing
see.
the direction of where I stood and took the photos. So you can see these two photos are taken together, but I was viewing this side and I was viewing this side, right? And again, this is built into your QGIS. So imagine you're doing field work and you took a bunch of photos, you come back and you now
Wow.
suddenly see where did you go, what areas did you cover, and so on. And if you right now we just use the static value, but if you knew about your camera's focal length, etc., you can actually give a very precise measurement of what data you could see from that.
Wow. Okay, maybe can you zoom out, please? So what we are seeing over here is that based on the direction, we got obviously the direction, and then based on that value, we got the focal length. But what exactly is the parameter for the radius over here?
Right now, it's a static value. So like
Oh,
how
I
far
see.
did you see and how wide? So it's a 45-degree view cone at this distance. But all of this, again, can be
Yeah,
configured based
depending
on
upon your
the type of
camera
camera.
value. Wow, this is interesting.
And other things, for example, people used to struggle for doing simple things earlier in QGIS when they'll say, okay, I have these points, but maybe you took a lot of points. You want to create your lines. So let's say you got some observation data from some species and say you tagged the species and you got 10 species and this is the geotagged information. Now you want to create paths out of it. What was the path that they flew? Right? So now there are tools in the processing toolbox. You can just say points to path. Right? And you can just say, I have this layer photos in which, what is the order? By default, the order is, in the thing. So you can say order by timestamp in order
Oh,
in
yeah.
which to. You can also group by, say, species 1, species 2, if there's an attribute for that. And
Okay.
you run this and you get the actual line that you could see that this is
see.
the order in which I visited each photo. Right? The processing tools that you see in QGIS are written in C++, optimized for background processing, optimized for multi-threading. So again, very fast, very well written tools. So again, if you use this, you'll get to do a lot of these interesting things very fast.
So yeah, so like we went from photos on our disk to all the way up to creating all three types of data sets. Like we have line to get the path, we have point to get the actual photos, and then we have polygon to see the focal length and how much area we basically covered. So yeah, that's really, I think this should be one of the features that these like field operator apps should have, like when you go for a AOI collection and all. I think this, having something like this can be really helpful over there. Wow. And
Yeah.
I had no idea you can do it, do so many things with QGIS, man.
Yeah. Another thing that I sometimes hear is, one of the strengths of QGIS is the fact that it can read all the data formats that you want. Right? It's built on top of GDAL and it supports for all the different formats without any extensions or any other thing. So one of my favorite things to show, and people don't sometimes realize, is QGIS can read Excel files directly, and you can work with this and you can share the data. So let me just show you. I have this really large Excel file. This is hydrological stations, and it's 100,000 rows of Excel
Okay.
data. And somebody said, okay, can you analyze this? Now you have the Excel file with some lat long info, and we want to analyze it in QGIS. So what do we do? Well, first you can just drag and drop. If I have this thing, let me just remove this layers first. And I can just drag and drop this into QGIS. And now QGIS is reading this 100,000 line Excel file, and it'll just load as a table in QGIS.
Okay,
And
yeah. So there is no
now
geometrical
default
flavor
is
to
a
it.
table. We don't have geometry, but again, of course, we have our toolbox. We can just say create points layer from table. So we say use this tool and say we have X field is longitude, Y field is latitude, and that's it. Yeah. And now you can see it took 3 seconds for me to create a layer from 100,000 points. And let me just show feature count, 150,000 points. And this is our global layer of points that we just created from an
Wow.
Excel file.
Wow, that too in like 5 seconds, man. Less
Yeah.
than 5 seconds.
So again, sometimes we hear criticism that QGIS cannot handle large data
Large
or
data. Yeah, yeah. This is
cannot do the
something that
processing.
I hear during the conferences that okay, QGIS is okay for your analysis work or for your scientific work, but yeah, probably not something that we would want to use in our business, like business use cases.
Yeah. Another thing that it's a recent feature that QGIS can also do geocoding built in, no plugins needed. So let's say I have some addresses, Excel file again, drop it into QGIS. So these are some addresses, and you can see I have this address of this place, and I want to geocode. So in the toolbox, you can also just do geocoder. It comes with a nominating geocoder built in, and we can just say this is the address field, geocode. It sends this request to the nominant geocoder,
Yeah.
and or you'll get a vector point layer back. Right. So again, this is something that is now built into QGIS. You also have this locator bar at the bottom of QGIS. I can see I can run any of the tool in background. I don't need to keep running.
Yeah.
In background. I can keep doing my work, and you can see there's a locator bar at the top, at the bottom of QGIS, where I can just do geocoding live. So I can just say New York City, right? I can just say NYC, and you can see it just pulls it up, and I can go to New York City.
I see. Okay, so this, I was not aware of this location bar at the bottom, man.
Yeah, and it can do a lot of things. So, for example, I use it all the time to launch some processing toolbox. So you'll just say, I want to, let's say, geocode. So I can just say A and just search for geocoding and enter, open. Right? I don't have to go to the toolbox. I can just launch stuff directly from my process bar. And you can also, there's a shortcut Control K to open this, Command K or Control K to open this. So it's a Command K, A, geocode, and the enter, and then you can just open the tool. So again, it's fully enabled with the keyboard shortcut.
Great.
Right? Another thing that sometimes is kind of interesting is the toolbox also contains some cartography tools. One of the areas which I've seen that people doubt QGIS is you can't create beautiful maps or can't create beautiful cartography, and it's exactly the opposite. QGIS has some amazing cartography tools which other software don't have. So as an example, I want to kind of show you. Do you see that map on behind? There's a map of India. This is the rivers of India map. And this, I purchased this map from this website called Grasshopper map. They do this amazing river maps where each basin you have different colors and river maps. And again, they are professional cartographers. They might have used some professional software, but we can do this in QGIS in 3 steps. Right? I'm going to show you, and you can use your toolbox to be able to do this. So let me just open up. So the data for this is coming from a place called Hydrosheds. They give this data set of basins. So they have basins. So these are the different basins of India, river basins. And you have the streams and rivers. So this is the streams and rivers generated from an elevation model. Right? So this is the data you can just download as shapefile. We have downloaded this. Now, how do we go from here to that map? So one of the kind of key things you want is you want to colorize each basin in a different color. And that's what gives that look of the map. If the adjacent basins had similar color, you won't be able to see that. But again, how many colors should you use?
Yeah,
how do you colorize this? Right? So you need to colorize. I want to use 10 colors, but how do I colorize each? Well, if you have the problem, which is a common cartography problem, QGIS has a tool called topological coloring. QGIS can color those polygons for you. So let's take this, and I'll just take the color. And again, this is based on this 4-color theorem that in any continuous map, you can use 4 colors and you can get a unique representation where no adjacent polygons are the same color. And let's run this. So this gives you a colored map, but again, it's not colored. What it did was it actually created a new attribute called color ID.
Color ID. And this is based on?
Based on the algorithm, which says if I give assigned color ID 1 to this polygon, I have to figure out what should be the color of the adjacent polygons. Okay. And I'll use the minimum required color for colorizing this.
So it's not metadata dependent as of
No, it's just a geometry dependent.
Okay.
And now I can come and say, take this color and we'll just use this to colorize our value. You can see. So now it has colorized this basins using those different colors. So now we can say, take each river, do a join with this, take the color ID based on the basin it is. So I did take the river data, joined it with the basin data, so it gets the ID of the color of the basin. And then we can say, now I want to colorize each river based on that color of the ID.
Wow.
And I can also say, again, you can see there's a different width to each river.
Yeah.
And again, I can say, don't have a static width. QGIS has this feature which is kind of amazing, that any configuration option that you see in your styling tab or labeling tab, or even in processing tools, wherever you see this box, right? This box says called data defined override. That means you can override the value of that number based on an expression or an attribute. So right now I've turned it off, so you can see each line is equal width, because I can configure it. But I said, no, don't do this. I want the width to be determined based on some attribute. So I can go and say, I can use the assistant. This is also a very useful tool to help you figure out what the value might be. So taking this, we will use this Strahler order field. Strahler order is a measure of how important the river is. The higher the number, the more important the stream is. So I'll say the values range from 1 to 8, and we want to go from size from 0.1 to 0.5. Okay? And we apply this, and you can see the river width changes. If I now say I want to go from 0.1 to 5, and it goes assigns more. So I can kind of experiment and kind of see what works best for my data. And again, you can see the layer styling panel here is interactive. As soon as you change something, your map updates. So this allows you to kind of create this map in an interactive way. And you have these tools like this, assistant, which allows you to figure out. And again, it figured out the expression for you. If you see the expression, this is the expression it figured out.
Okay. So you don't have to write the expressions anymore.
Yeah. But if you want to, you can, and you can override this with an expression. So again, just with a processing tool and some assistant in our cartography, we could create this rivers of India map in just a few clicks.
Wow, this is amazing. This is really amazing. I was not aware that QGIS has so many styling capabilities as well, man.
Yeah. Maybe I want to show one more thing and to highlight the point. One of the other things that QGIS can do is it can also download a lot of data. Let my QGIS start. One of the other things is for automation. Let's say there are many use cases where you want to get data from the web, from intranet, from other servers, and then create your map. One example of this would be, I work with somebody who said, my job is every morning I come in, I download the latest data from NOAA about all the events that occurred, combine it with my internal database, and I need to produce a map. And that literally takes him an hour. So can I use QGIS to automate? And we put together something that looks like this. Let me show you. So here is the map of US. He wants to get the latest fire counts from fire events from NOAA every day. And to do this in QGIS, we have this tool called download file. You can just say, give a URL, and I can just download this file from any server directly into QGIS. And we use this to say, we want to now take this and build a simple model. It says, take the layer, download the file. The file covers a much larger region, but we want to just clip it to the region. And then you also want to style it. We have a specific style for the data. So I just want to show you what this looks like. So this is the URL that updates constantly and gets the latest fire count information. So if I just go here and say I want to download this, my Chrome browser has downloaded this as a zip file. Again, QGIS can read any format, so I can just throw in a zip file directly and say this is what the fire counts currently look like. Right. So if I download this, I have stuff outside of the US. It's not styled in the way I want. I want to automate all of this. So now I have a model. I can just say run this, downloading the data, styling it, clipping it, and styling it. And you can see I get this.
So yeah, so like if we can look at the model one more time, please. So we have a base layer that's boundary of the entire USA. Then we are downloading the file from the server. Then we are taking the file, clipping it based on the shape file that we have. So ultimately we have only the points which are inside US. Then we are styling it, and then we are visualizing it on the front end.
Yeah, and again, you can add one more step. Say I have a map template, just render a map template and save out a PDF. Right, so you can also directly do it. So you can just come in, run this model every day, and you get a PDF that you can directly share.
Wow. So all you have to do is like maybe like right click and then run the model, and then that's all.
And again, later in our conversation for automation, we can see that all of these models can be exported as Python scripts. So even you can go one step further and say, let's just run it every day, 6 a.m. without me being present, and I come into office, I have my PDF file waiting for me.
So yeah, so basically you just you just run it as a cron job, and then you're done.
And again, this can be done by an analyst without knowing how to code and how to do all of this kind of workflow and pipelining and everything. You just use QGIS as your workflow automation tool.
I think I would like to shift gears a little bit and maybe now deep dive into automations. This looks very interesting. Unless if you have another any like example that will blow our mind, we can move forward. So what do you think?
I think we can stop here. I think what I want to demonstrate is that QGIS can do a lot, and just kind of using it and exploring it will allow you to discover all of these tools, and you can apply this to your work. It's been used widely across organizations by many different people. So again, if you just are watching this part and you are intrigued, go and explore QGIS. You'll find that it is a very capable, very mature piece of software that can do everything that you need.
Definitely, and still we have only discovered things which are inbuilt. I mean, we haven't even looked at the plugins that are available, and I know that some of the plugins are so good, like they take QGIS to a next level. For sure, but yeah, I mean, it all depends upon your use case. But I think the one that you presented, the model, is something that is really interesting for me as a developer, because most of the times, like I'll work with piece of softwares where we want to automate stuff, and then we usually try to use combination and maybe using bandit to make sure that okay, two pieces of software are working together. Sometimes we'll get a data, use GDAL, take it to raster.io, then use NumPy to do stuff, and then like ship it back either as a vector data or maybe take a printout or do matplotlib and stuff like that. But what I feel is that as per our last conversation and the last presentation that you have shown, I think probably like QGIS can be a replacement for all these sort of things, all these different steps that I'm taking together and making sure that they are working perfectly. So probably we'll talk more about the automation. So maybe like if you can just give a basic idea about automation, that okay, let's say that the example that you gave was a very good example, I would say. So I want to get a data and I want to again, like I want to clip it, I want to style it, and then I want to create a map template. So is it possible for us to have this like live demo of some sort of data set, if it's possible?
Sure, I can show you. So let me just give you of the overall options for automation in QGIS. You can start from the very basic by using the tools in your processing toolbox. So you have the built-in tools. You can install some plugins. They'll add more tools to your toolbox. And each of the tool in the toolbox can be combined with other tools. And that is the modeler. So you can say if my workflow involves 5 steps, running these 5 tools in succession, I can put them together as a workflow using the graphical model. So again, you don't need to know coding. You can just create that model. And now when you run the model, you can now run all the 5 steps without any input, right? You can just go through those 5 steps. So that is the first level of automation. The next level, you can say, I have a single tool or a workflow that I want to run on multiple inputs. So let's say I want to run it on 100 files
So
or
you
all
mean
files.
like a loop of 100 files or like?
Yes,
Okay.
loop of 100 files. So let's say
Okay.
I have one file that does X, and I want to create an output, but I have to process all 50 states of the US.
Oh, okay.
And so do I run this 50 times? But you can just say run this in a batch process, and you can configure it to run on each of those inputs. Or you can just say I have this model, and this is typically happens when you are doing some analysis, that you're combining multiple layers, having some different weightage of each layer, and combining them to create an output. What if I want to test different combinations of weights? Maybe I want to try all the values from 1 to 100 and run my model.
Oh, okay.
Can I just run it together? So I can just
Yeah.
configure my tool and say, run this 100 times with this value, right? And it can all happen automatically. So that's a second level of automation where you can run a tool or workflow in a batch process. And that's built in. And I'll show an example of that as well.
So an example can be, for example, the one that we were looking at, the fire, where we were looking at the entire US. So let's say now if I want to go state-wise, so my clipping will become like a state-wise, and then that means like essentially I'm running it 50 times. So you're saying
Yes.
that, okay, if we do batch processing, it's like you're running it for a single time, but then you are getting like 50 results, if I'm not
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Got it.
The third level of automation you can do is map making. If your work involves generating multiple maps, let's say for each admin region. So you have your map and you say, I want to create one map for each admin region, each county or each district of my state. And QGIS has a tool called Atlas, which you can configure, and you'll say, this is my overall map. This is each admin area. Go and generate one map for each admin area. And let's just go and render out all those maps, right? So we can see example of that. Once you have, these are the kind of built-in non-coding tools, and then you can say, I do all of this, but I have some missing pieces where I want to add some automation, but there's no built tool that exactly does this. You can write some Python code, add a tool in a toolbox with your own code, and now you can combine it with your model or a batch process, or even you can write some Python expressions which can be used in other expressions. So that's the next level. And finally, we'll show that everything that we can do it without we being there. We can just export everything as a standalone Python script and launch it either as a cron job or from a web app. A web app on a server, QGIS is installed, you can say run, and it just goes and triggers that workflow in that server.
Oh, okay. So when you say that we can use custom Python code into this, so probably like the use case can be if you have your own set of application or your own Python package that where you want to feed this data or maybe get the data from that package, something like that. Am I?
So QGIS has a lot of these interesting tools which other software don't have, and also a lot of the implementations are very, very fast. So instead of using, say, GeoPandas to do some processing or some other tool, you say my QGIS tools are actually faster and better. I have a workflow. Let me just use QGIS's library through Python.
I see.
And you can do GeoPandas, and you do something, and then for this I'm going to use some QGIS algorithm. So you can kind of invoke that from your regular Python code.
Okay. So essentially, I'm like, again, what I said earlier is that I'm trying to like delete this raster IO or GeoPandas or NumPy from my code and then trying to replace it with the QGIS, like a one-stop shop, I would say. Okay, yeah, I'm really excited to see this now.
Yeah, and another kind of example recently is worked with a drone company who was wanted a lot of these orthomosaics, and they wanted to create tiles, web tiles, web tiles, and they found that there is Jidal to tiles and other tools are available, but none of them are multi-threaded. And QGIS has a multi-threaded tiling implementation in the toolbox. So there's generate XYZ tiles, which can generate MB tiles output, but in a multi-threaded environment.
Yeah.
So they found it to be much faster, but they say, how can we use this? We have customers who upload their orthomosaics, and we have to generate tiles on our server. So they could run this algorithm by using QGIS in a headless mode, where the workflow, the orthomosaic gets uploaded, QGIS algorithm gets launched via Python, and it generates the tiles without you launching QGIS, right? So you can use the QGIS libraries and the tools in a headless way to process data.
Nice. This is pure gold, man. Headless QGIS. All right. So yeah, we are ready for the demo.
All right, let me share my screen.
Okay.
So this, I'm showing you an example from my course, which I teach on Advanced QGIS, where I teach about automation. And we'll take this problem. So this is a really interesting data set of maritime piracy. So every time there's a pirates attack some ship, there is a database of maritime piracy that they capture that, the location of that incident, and you get a shape file like this, that this was the incident, this was the date, this was the, what happened there, what was the victim, how many people got injured, or thing, what kind of hostility was it. And we have this global database of maritime piracy.
Okay.
So the example that we want to do is, let's say you are an analyst who've been asked to say, how can we improve enforcement? We have, say, 10 ships, which area should we patrol more?
Yeah.
So we want to do some density analysis and say which areas of the world are more prone to pirate attacks. So we take this data, and what we want to do is we want to do some fishnet analysis. So we want to generate a grid, and we want to count the number of polygons. So first, I'll just do this using the toolbox, and then I'll show what the workflow of that looks like. So first step we want to do is, again, it's always useful to, when you're doing this kind of analysis, to work in an equal area projection. So right now this data comes in, lat long, we can't do this. So let's just, first step, I want to just reproject this layer, my base layer, to the equal earth projection. This is a really good equal area projection. So if we generate a grid, each grid will have the same area. So we'll just run this and we'll reproject this data. Now we want to generate a grid. So QGIS has a built-in grid generation tool called Create Grid. So we'll just say, I want to generate hexagonal grids into my region. So I'll say in my all the region of this world where we have, and spacing would be, let's say, 250 kilometers. I want a 250 kilometer by 250 kilometer grid. Run this, and we get a grid. We get a grid of 250 kilometer by 250 kilometer hexagons. Each grid has an equal count. If I overlay this on the points, you can see some of the grids don't have any value. So we'll just, say, we'll extract some values. So there's tools to select and extract certain grids. So we'll say extract by location. This is a tool which say, I want to extract all grids which have at least some points in them. So we'll run this tool and say, we'll take the grid layer and we'll find all the features from our input where they intersect. So we'll run this. And again, there's a spatial index. I'm going to cover spatial index later on. So again, we have this grid points. You can see now we have the grid points. And each grid point has one or more points over it. And now we want to just say which grid has the higher points, or I want to do some count. So I can just run this tool called count points in polygon. And we'll say, take this and generate this output of count points in polygon. So it's now counting the points in polygon and generating this grid where we have the value of each grid as the point. Okay. And I think I made a mistake. Use the
I think you use the extract.
I'll just do just say extract by location again on this, on the count, and we'll just extract the location like this. So we got this kind of grids, and we can also just do a style and say, show us the value based on the grid counts. Right, so again, you can kind of style this and
density.
Yeah. So this is kind of thing that you say, okay, I want to do this. Maybe you want to do this every week when the new data becomes available.
Yeah.
Right? So you say, I don't want to run this 5 steps. You can make a mistake easily. Remember, I chose the wrong input.
Yes.
Again, it's easy to make a mistake. It's also kind of error prone. Also, you might say you go and take it to the people. They say, oh, use the 250 kilometer grid. I want to use a 100 kilometer grid. Can you read an analysis? Now, that means I need to change my whole analysis and do this. So instead of doing all this manually, we can just say, let's just do it all automatically. So we'll remove these layers, and we can now go to the modeler and say create a new model, where we can change each of the input that we want and build a workflow. So I'm going to show you the model that is already built. So this is what the modeler tool looks like, where you can have multiple inputs. You can specify what inputs you want. So here we have our base layer, which is the global layer. We have the input layer points. We also are taking grid size as an input parameter. So
Okay.
we can set it as a default. So for example, here we say default would be 250 kilometers, but it can be configured to a different value. And again, you can see first we do reproject. The output goes to create grid. We create a spatial index. This is also a tip that whenever you are doing analysis, spatial index helps you speed up your analysis. Whenever you see this warning of spatial index doesn't exist, you should add a step for creating a spatial index. Creating index takes maybe a few milliseconds, but it saves you huge amount of processing time. So when we do this, we run the extract by location, count points in polygon, and you will get this. So now what I can do is I can just say, take this is my input layer. And again, you can add all this kind of input validation. So I can only choose the polygon layer here. I can only choose the point layer and so on. And I can just click run. And I get directly the polygons based on an output.
The number point. Yeah.
So it's the 5 steps internally. And again, you can, if you run it from the modeler, you can actually see the individual steps being run. So it's easy to debug. Let me just run this again, and you will see this. So you can see it's running all the 5 steps. 105, 205, and 305, and so on. Right? And again, now I'm able to do this. If I get a different input, just load it in QGIS, run my model, and I'm able to generate the output.
Got it. So essentially, like you are essentially what we are like a model or a flow is like another name for like your own toolbox. So all these tools that we see in a toolbox are one way or another, they are also models, right? So what we are doing is we are essentially creating our own functions based on the existing functions and the data or whatever that we want. Okay.
Yeah, so there is a slight difference. So all the tools here, QGIS calls them algorithms. So that you can think of as one script that you wrote, right? What model does it allows you to combine multiple scripts together as a workflow.
Okay.
If you want to write your own script, you can see there's a scripts tab. This is where you can write your own scripts, and they also can be combined with other scripts. So you can see, let's say I have some algorithm I developed and I want to write a script. So you write your own Python code and the processing, but that is a one piece in your model which you can put it anywhere. So what you said is kind of partially correct, but model allows you to kind of bring all of this together in a workflow.
Yeah. Okay. And model is essentially a sort of like a no-code tool for you to create flows. Okay, great.
And again, the advantage of doing this is that if you write a custom script in your toolbox, or you have any tools in your toolbox here, every tool you can right click and say batch process. That means you can run it with multiple inputs. So even a model. So now I have a model which I want to run this as a batch process. So I can say, take this model, run this as a batch process.
So, and let's try to execute this for like 100 kilometers, 250, and then 300.
Yeah. So let's just say I can, my input layer is this, and I can say autofill everything to be this one. Grid size, you can write an expression. If you just want to write, I want to run it with increment of 10 kilometers from 100 to 1000. I can just write an expression and do this. But right now, let's just do static. So 100 kilometers, let's say 150, 200,000, and 250, right? And this will be our thing. And we can say, I want to generate my output will be, let's say, grid underscore this. And again, you can autofill the name of the file as well. So you can say, fill with the parameter value of the grid size. So you can say this will be grid 100,000 grid.
Okay.
And let's just run this. So now it's running each step with
for each algorithm. For each input values.
And you can see now I have different grid sizes: 250 kilometer, 200 kilometer, 150 kilometers, 100 kilometers. Right.
Wow.
So again, you can do this kind of automation It also helps you do this sensitivity analysis. A lot of the models that you build may be sensitive to one input parameter. So you don't want to be sensitive to a specific parameter, or at least you want to be aware of it. So you can now run it with multiple inputs and test how your output behaves. So here the sensitivity analysis would be, let's say, what are the top 5 regions? And if I choose a 200-kilometer grid, maybe my top 5 grids end up here. But if I choose 100 kilometer, it ends up somewhere else. And that's my model is very sensitive to grid size. So I need to be aware of it. And again, this is a problem called MAUP, modifiable areal unit problem. This is a problem in geoscience where, depending on the configuration of your admin region, your output can vary widely. You have the same input layer, but you can kind of create different statistical output based on the grid size that you choose. There is no kind of solution to this problem. It's just that you need to do the sensitivity analysis. So when you do this analysis, just don't go with the default grid size. Test different grid sizes and say, okay, all grid size and then you have good confidence that your kind of the workflow that you build is not sensitive to a particular configuration of the grid size.
I see. Okay, I think maybe now we can move to one of the very interesting topic, which is like headless. Like, how can I do it without using QGIS?
So this is another kind of analysis that I did. It's a hydrological analysis where we have some weather data, weather station data, and we want to compute the average rainfall within each basin. And there are different weather stations within that, and we want to compute the average of it. And this involves multiple steps. So you can see I have a model that looks like this. Right? It says, first, read the Excel file, create the points from layer, extract the attribute, create Voronoi polygons, clip them, do the intersection, and aggregate. And again, you can apply an expression here which says weigh each polygon by the area of intersection and so on. Right? So again, it's a kind of complex algorithm, but now we can just run this and say, I have my basins, I have the rain gauge data, I have the boundary, go and compute the areal mean rainfall. So this is the kind of modular, purely based using the QGIS tools. And you can see it works and we get this output, right? So we now say for each basin, this is the average precipitation based on this. And this is something that you'll probably have to do this if you're doing this analysis for flood modeling, for any forecasting. You will have to run this for maybe every week or as soon as you get new data. So again, it might be helpful to automate this and say, I have this model, but as soon as the new data becomes available, I'll download the Excel file and I want to run this in a headless way. So first step is we have a model, we can export this as a Python algorithm. So right click, and we have the Python code, right? So this is the PyQGIS code, which uses all the PyQGIS API to say, this is what how you process this data. You take the input, these are the inputs, you run the different algorithms in each step, and you generate an output, right? So this is the kind of a workflow that has been generated. This uses all the QGIS classes. One of the challenges is how to make Python find all those classes in a system. So you have QGIS installed, and you need to find the path to QGIS and say, this is where all my packages are. Also, if you have multiple versions of Python, you tell QGIS which version of Python to use.
Correct.
And so,
it can be painful.
So you need to kind of have an additional script which sets all the environment variables and then launches this particular model. So let's take a look at what those looks like. So here I have put this here. So this is the algorithm directly exported from QGIS, no changes. And I want to run this in a headless mode. So first thing I want to do is I want to write a script that starts QGIS in the headless mode. So we are saying there's a class called QGIS application. We initialize this and we say false. False means don't start QGIS UI. Just initialize QGIS, load all the required paths and packages, but don't start QGIS. Right? So we start, let's say initialize QGIS. From then onwards, we just say, I have a processing tool that I want to run. So we just import processing and then just say processing.run. This is the name of my tool.
Okay.
Go and run that.
So this is the aerial mean rainfall is another Python file, if I'm not
That
wrong.
is this one where we exported this.
Yeah.
So this file is saved
Okay.
as
So
aerial mean rainfall.
got it. And then you have a class. So you are basically referring to that particular class
Yes.
in that file with the parameters.
So
Got it.
here, this script starts QGIS, runs this tool, and exits QGIS.
Okay. So this is like a helper file for that file.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Got it.
So if you run this file, and if all your environment variables and everything is set correctly, and your Python from where you're running Python can find QGIS, everything will run. But
Okay.
Unless you install QGIS via Conda, which is the preferred method if you're running QGIS on a server, you can do Conda install QGIS, and it installs this in the Conda environment. And if you run it from there, you don't need anything else. You can just run this script, and everything will work. But if you just install QGIS on Windows, right,
Yeah,
regular,
like a
or
traditional
on a Mac or
way.
thing, then you need to set the environment variables yourself. So if you want to do this, you need one more configuration. This can be, if you're on a server, this could be your environment variables on a server, or it could be a shell script like this, which is a shell script which just says, this is where my QGIS is. I'm on a Mac here. So this is, you're on a Mac. This is where to find the Python. QGIS comes with its own Python. So you can say, use QGIS as Python, not the system Python, and some other thing where other stuff installed, right? So it's just exporting those environment variables and then running the script.
Got it.
So this is to set your environment and run the script. So let's run this. Let me show you this.
Is this the bash script or the batch script? Is this available on your GitHub, like for anyone to download?
Yes. So I have it. I gave a talk on this with a video. I have a video as well as the script available. You can link to that particular video. So let's say. So here we have, I think we have one more Python about that, right? So here we have our files, and I'm just going to say run script.
Yeah.
Right? So this will set my environment variable, call that helper Python script, which will start QGIS and run the algorithm that I've just exported. Right?
Okay.
And I run this, and you'll see that it is now doing the analysis of doing the intersection, doing the aggregation, all the stuff that we did. And you can see output layer created. And you can just say this was, I think it creates everything. This one, which was just created. You can see it's this shape file was just created. Let's just take this look at this file. This file was just created by the headless QGIS, and it's exactly the same.
Oh. Okay.
So now, and just to prove that it can work without QGIS, I can just close QGIS, right? There's no QGIS running on my system. And I can now run this. It'll just run as a Python script. Now, if you think about your workflow, you can now call any Python algorithm via Python, or you can call any QGIS class from Python. So if you have a web app where you just say user clicks a button, web framework, you go and say when the user clicks this button, go and run this Python code. And that Python code would be this script that we just ran. And your web app has already initialized all the environment variables, so it knows how to find all the QGIS. So now you are able to trigger this from anywhere where you can trigger Python code.
So essentially, if I do conda install QGIS on my Ubuntu server, for example, and then I create an app, let's say Fast API, Django, whatever it is. So I can essentially use all these things, like all these QGIS classes into my code. But it's what's your take on the memory consumption of this? Like, is it actually initializing? So when you say it's not initializing the QGIS itself, but just running the logic behind it or the core behind it. So is that memory optimized, or what do you, like? What's been your experience on this take?
I've not tested the memory use, but again, the memory that is going to consume is the memory to consume while it's running the tool itself. So whatever code you're running, the PyQGIS code, that will run that whatever memory it's consuming. And that is quite optimized. So the processing tools in QGIS are heavily optimized because they use the processing framework, which uses it's multi-threaded algorithms, C++ algorithms. They are not Python algorithms where they can kind of consume a lot of memories and can be problematic. So again, if you go via the processing algorithms, you are guaranteed to have a very good performance. And again, your QGIS is initialized only for the time that the algorithm is running. So your app doesn't really consume all that time
exactly.
while it's running. You can
What,
just, when you click on it, you can do this. And a lot of this processes are also can be done as an offline process, right? You can say, I have a cron job that looks at this folder for new data every 10 minutes. If the data shows up, I'll just launch it on a separate server. I don't need to use the same server as my web app is running, right? I can just go and launch in a cloud server.
I can have another like a server which can run on its own and then do the cron jobs for me and probably push the data somewhere else. So I think like one of the most important question is that, for example, most of the people who get into GIS are not necessarily from programming background, so they can be from geology or hydrology, geography, or anything like that. And for that particular reason, understanding Python might not be easy, but at the same time might not be something that they want to do. Probably they don't want to get into web development. But how exactly can they get started with this template? Is there any resource available? Of course, you mentioned that you cover this on your Advance QGIS course, but is there any book or any sort of resource available online which can just give an idea that, okay, what are the possibilities and how can I try hands-on for this?
Yeah, so I think that generally what I suggest is, if you are completely new to programming and you want to learn automation, the process I showed, learning how to use the processing toolbox, learning batch processing, learning model, they're good first steps. And they allow you to think in terms of how a programmer thinks, in terms of how to build pipelines, how to kind of write a for loop, right? So you'll get used to how to kind of set up your workflows, set up your processes so that they can be later automated fully using Python. So that's a good, very approachable for GIS analysts, because they're used to kind of this workflows. And I have the full course, which is an Advanced QGIS course, which is completely open source material. So people can just download the data. I have step-by-step instructions. You can do this. I have step-by-step tutorials on my qgstutorials.com site, which they can also do this. And there are quite good books. I recommend books from the publisher called Locate Press. They are the Locate Press is a publisher started by Gary Sherman, who is the founder of QGIS.
Okay.
Who created a QGIS project. He started a press so that he can create books, and they are really high quality books. A lot of my colleagues and friends are been the author of those. So again, if you go to locatepress.com and find any QGIS book, I highly recommend all of those. They are high quality. So there are application specific books as well as more generic, like mastering QGIS or learning how to do data visualization in QGIS. So those are good books to start with. And again, once you get familiar with the kind of automation within the QGIS tools, then you need to learn Python. And I recommend not learning Python directly for QGIS, because QGIS programming with Python uses PyQGIS, which is using C++ classes, and you need to learn about classes and how to use those. So that is a little advanced, but I have 3 courses on Python. Again, all are on OpenCourseWare. So once you learn the basics of Python, the syntax, and doing processing using pandas and GeoPandas, then once you can get good with this, you can then approach QGIS automation. Again, directly building the scripts and plugins are again a high bar for a lot of people. So what I recommend is, so another automation tool I recommend is something called Actions in QGIS. This is my favorite way to use Python in QGIS to automate tasks which are your everyday tasks. And it takes a very little bit of code. It's a great way to kind of get your feedback immediately on your code and see this. So maybe I want to show you some examples of those. For people who are just looking to get into Python and QGIS, start with this. You'll save time for yourself. You will wow your bosses, because you can do something which might take a month to code in a plugin, but just a few hours to code is an action. And again, it does a lot of interesting things. So let me show you some examples of the actions and what it can do. I have a full course on QGIS Actions. So again, if you want to check out, you can just go to my OpenCourseWare and you can get all the material. If you want to learn step by step on how to do this, you can do this. But let's say, so actions are something that you can trigger when a user clicks on a feature. So let's say we
Okay.
have this layer of different parcels, and I want to do something when a user clicks on a parcel. A lot of times your automation requires that I do this and something happens. Now with actions, you can trigger a Python code, any arbitrary Python code, when a user clicks on a feature. It's a built-in feature of QGIS where you can go and say, go to the properties of any layer, go to the actions and say, I want to add an action here. And you can add a Python action. Okay. Let me load this this one, which is already the actions defined on this. So if I go and load the action, you can see I have a defined action called mark QA done.
Okay.
And I have some Python code which says, 2 lines. Take the value of the attribute called checked, make it yes.
Okay.
Right? So that's what it should do, where I have this attribute, yes or no. I've styled my layer so that you can see I have this attribute called yes or no, checked yes or no. Let's say I've checked this data and I want to mark this as yes. Normally I would go to right click, attribute table, edit, update the value. But
Correct.
I want to automate this. So you can see once I have an action, you'll see this button in your toolbar, which gets enabled. So you'll see all the actions here. So I can say mark QA done. So now I'm going to click on this feature.
Oh, okay. So this, wow. So this
So
basically is essentially you are taking the step out of going into field editor or like the table and then editing stuff over there. But again, like there you might get into an error where instead of like Y, you might write something else like Z, and then it can create a whole different problem altogether. So
And again,
this,
you can run any Python code, not just PyQGIS. Any
yeah,
Python code. So you can do everything that you can do in QGIS, but now you can trigger that when a user clicks on it.
wow.
And
So
these are also saved with QGIS project. So if you want to say, I built this and you want to share it with somebody, send them the QGIS project, they open it, they have an action. So again, you don't need to publish a plugin or anything like that. It just goes with your project.
So when you say like, so when you say that any Python code, so essentially I can have some my own custom APIs at any point of time, like outside QGIS, but like I can also execute those using this,
Yeah.
right?
Let's say I have this example. You know Mapillary? Mapillary has a street level panorama. What I want to do is, again, this is from a real use case. One of our students, he said, I have a ML model where I can detect fake pharmacies. And
Okay.
I want to now run that model on some panorama. I want to load the Mapillary panorama, run my model in QGIS and see the result. And I was like, okay, so you have some data. So this is a pharmacy. And now he wants to get the panorama from Mapillary and run his model. So you can set up an action. So you can see I have set up an action here, which takes this data and sends a request to Mapillary and returns the panorama and shows this in QGIS. So now I can have this code. I can say show panorama, click here, and it'll show me the panorama from Mapillary.
Wow. Okay.
And I can have one more step to say load my model. And
Yeah, on top of this, or maybe, yeah, I think so. So basically we are using some third-party APIs inside QGIS itself. So yeah, because like so far what I thought is that the only way I can do any sort of customization in QGIS is by creating my own plugin. But I think, yeah, like actions and models can be helpful like 99% of the time. We don't need to build an entire plugin or like host the entire plugin somewhere else.
So another kind of useful thing you can do with actions is data management. Let's say I have a lot of raster data, a lot of high-res tiles. I can't load everything in QGIS at once. It's just going to be too much. Let's say I have 1 petabyte of imagery, which is common when you have a lot of high-res tiles. So instead, you can create a tile index like this, where you say you have a tile index. There's a tool to create tile index, which says this is the location and this is the location of the TIFF file on my system. And then I can have an action, which just the 2 lines of code where I say I click on it, it goes and loads the tile from my disk. I can click around, I load the tiles. It's okay. I did this. These are all full high-res tiles. When I'm done with it, I can just say remove, and it's going to remove this. Right?
Okay.
So again, if you see the code to do this, it's probably just 4 lines of code, right? Just this one. iface.add raster layer of the path and set active layer. That's it. So now when you're learning Python and you want to do this automation, you can do this, something that is useful, and you can kind of do this with it. You can also call other plugins of QGIS within that. So this is an example that I want to show that there is a plugin called Open Route Service API. so which is using OpenStreetMap data and does the network analysis. So you have the once you have the plugin installed, you have the tools here, and you can create isochrones and distance matrix and all of these complex things. It just sends a request to the plugin, to the service, which returns the polygon. So now you have, imagine we have written action, which just calls that plugin, and I say create a 1 kilometer isochrone. So I click on this point, and now it's sent the request to that open out service API. I called isochrone back.
Oh, okay.
And I say I want now a 5 kilometer isochrone. I click, and you get the result from here. Right. So again, you can do this kind of thing interactively using action by triggering other things. So this is kind of my recommendation. So when you get into QGIS development, use this. It's much easy to code, much easy to distribute. And once you have this and you get used to doing stuff, and you say this is useful, I want to now share it with the public, and they can plug it, and that's where you go and write the plugin.
Exactly. Great. This is amazing. So okay, this is really amazing that we can automate, and not just with the model builder, but also like using actions we can take step further. So as you said that, okay, we can execute some sort of action on click of the feature. Are there any other events that we can capture, like?
So actions can be triggered from multiple places. It can be triggered from an attribute table. So you can see there's a button in attribute table you can add. So you just review an attribute table, you can click a button. You can also trigger it by right-clicking on a feature, and you will have it there. You can also trigger an action when you digitize a new feature. So you can say digitize a new feature, and when that form pops up to say what are the different attributes, you can have an action and say go and fill this value based on something, right? So you can have trigger some Python action there. So again, actions are kind of embedded within QGIS at multiple places, and you can trigger your Python code.
Okay. So I think probably now I would like to talk more about the contribution. So obviously, like when we are using this, what all various ways we can contribute as a developer and as a non-developer person to QGIS, like what all different things that the community usually looks for in terms of the capabilities or skills when it comes to contribution.
So first of all, I would say get involved, be part of the community, subscribe to the mailing list on the QGIS website. There are mailing lists for the users and developers. So whatever interest is, just subscribe to the mailing list. You will see people asking questions, people are kind of talking with each other. You can also help if you are a QGIS user and you know the answer. So subscribe to the mailing list. Another way to kind of be involved with the community is to join something called QGIS Open Day. This is a global event that happens the last Friday of every month. And it's an open event where there's a Jitsi room where the developers, all the QGIS members, and again, anybody can join there, and the whole community comes together. There are talks that people propose, and you can listen to those talks. You can go and ask questions. You can also meet people who are the QGIS developers who attend this event as well. So let me just show how to find the QGIS Open Day. And again, all the past QGIS Open Days are also on the QGIS Wiki. So you can go and listen to all the talks that happened in the past. So QGIS Open Day, every month, that is an event page. You can go and this one happened just last week where people give talks. Somebody gave a talk on QGIS with Blender. Somebody gave a talk on water quality mapping. And it's a live, fun event. Also, every time there's a new launch of QGIS, there's a celebration. So again, you'll feel part of the community. You'll know who are the people behind it, who are the developers. And you can also ask, how can I contribute? And you'll get some guidance there. So that's the first step, I would say. Kind of get involved in the community where you can just know who the people are, get involved with people. And few other ways you can contribute. One, if you're a non-technical user, you say, I just want to, I don't know any coding, but how can I help QGIS?
Exactly.
The place that QGIS is always looking for help is documentation. QGIS is a very fast-moving project. Every release, which happens every 4 months, the change log video is 4 hours long. right?
Oh.
So it's a lot of changes that happen. So a lot of things are happening. And the QGIS developer team, there's a full-time documentation writer who's hired by the QGIS project, but there are a lot of volunteer documentation writers as well. And again, they can't keep up. There's no way, even a team of 10 people can keep up with all
Yeah,
the
of
development.
course, of
So they're
course.
always looking for help, and it's a great way for non-contributor to say, I want to learn a little bit more about this part of QGIS. Let's say I will go and document all the undocumented processing tools. And again, it's a great way to get involved. There is on the website, there's a extensive documentation on how to do this, which you are allowed to go and start contributing. So again, try to contribute to documentation whenever you can. That's really a big help as a non-technical contributor. Another way I always say is test QGIS. One missing piece, one complaint that people have on QGIS is sometimes QGIS is buggy. It says,
Yeah.
I use QGIS and it doesn't behave as I expect. One is QGIS runs on all the platforms that are available. It runs on probably 10 different flavors of Linux. And
Yeah,
again, you
yeah.
cannot test everything on every flavor of Linux.
Yeah.
Maybe you are running a specific flavor of Linux, you are using a tool in a specific way, you get a bug. So when you find a bug, you report it. Typically, the bugs are fixed very fast by the QGIS development team. But again, finding the bugs is also a challenge. So there's a nightly version that you can download and say, this is the current development, and this is the future release that's going to happen. So go and run the nightly version so you can test the features, and when you run into bug, you can report that. So developers do appreciate people testing it. So there is a 3 month of development and 1 month of feature freeze. So
Okay.
that's a period where there's a call for testing of the nightlies. So you should definitely help and report bugs to the team. So that really helps.
So I think the easiest way is that wherever you're using QGIS in whatever industry or whatever workflow, I think the easiest way is that you test out everything, you document everything, and whatever bugs that you are fixing right now by putting band-aid, maybe that is something that you can start putting as an issues on QGIS repository. Like putting issues itself can be a contribution as well to the project. So yeah, like because most of the time when I talk to people, they're like, okay, we are completely lost, like how exactly can we contribute, because the code is of like million lines and it's impossible to for a new person or a beginner to understand each and every line. So like for me, what I think and what I recommend is like creating issues itself is a part of contribution. So I think I would like to wind up by like getting your view on a little bit of how exactly QGIS is implementing this different AI tools available. Like for example, segment anything in geospatial is again a killer product, and in last couple of months I think there are so many data sets that are released by Google, by Meta, and by so many other companies. So like where exactly are we in terms of development of like like AI centric products on QGIS?
So there have been some plugins. There is a segment anything plugin that is in development. I think it's kind of in development phase, which you can test it out. So it's not yet released, but it's again using the segment geospatial package to do the segmenting within QGIS. There's also a Q Chat GPT plugin, which allows you to type natural language queries, and mostly for things like load data in GeoJSON format for this particular city, and it'll just go and kind of find the data and load that. Or it can help you write some PyQGIS code which you can run. So that's there. There are also other plugins which tap into commercially hosted deep learning models. So let's say you have developed a model to do building detection, and there are plugins and services where you can go and sign up for that service. You load your image, run that model, which will do the inference on their hosted,
Yeah, yeah.
and then to show the result on QGIS. So again, there are kind of people are trying to integrate this. QGIS is a great interface. Everybody needs a way to visualize,
Correct,
load and visualize
correct,
geospatial data, right? So
correct.
QGIS provides a platform, and then you can hook up any API service using that. So I think there's going to be definitely more and more integrated towards those cloud services. And since the cloud native geospatial is the future, I think integrating using QGIS as your client for all of the AI tools that happens are hosted in the cloud would be the way to go in the future.
So I think that brings up the new topic of like QGIS client. Like, what is your opinion, or like what's your experience with using this like QGIS server or like QGIS cloud and all?
So this is again, QGIS is not just a QGIS desktop software; it's a full ecosystem.
Correct.
On one end, you have the field data collection tools. So there are mobile apps on Android and iOS. There are a couple of apps which are both open source, something called QField, something called Mergent Maps, which are based on QGIS, which allow you to run a version of QGIS on your mobile device and set up so that whatever data you collect flows from your mobile device to your QGIS.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so that's a field data collection. You take it into QGIS, you do your analysis, you create a map. The next step is you want to push it out to your users. So you want to push it out as a web map. The QGIS also has a QGIS server software, which is designed to take a QGIS project with all the style and all the expressions and everything. It understands all of that. And there's a one-to-one mapping between what you see on a desktop versus what you see on the web. So many other software like GeoServer, right? You need to have a custom style. You say QGIS has this color, I want to do this. And again, QGIS has a huge cartographic capability, and not all of this will be available in the software.
It does not. Yeah. I have experienced this, that yeah, some of the things like some of the styles you can only do in QGIS, but you cannot export it as an SLD. Like simply you cannot
So
do it.
here in QGIS server, it just reads a QGIS project. It understands all the style because it's built on top of QGIS. So that's, if your requirement is I want to have a map that looks exactly like in my desktop, the way you author the map as well is using QGIS. There's a button to say save it to QGIS server, and then this goes to your server and it shows up as a web map. Also, you get all the capabilities of say print layout. In QGIS, you can create a print layout, and you can say I want to save this map as a PDF from the web. You have a layout and click print. It uses the QGIS's layouting library to create the PDF from the web. Right, so you can get all those capabilities in your web client and server. So again, both are open source. In my experience, I think people who have compared all the different solutions, the performance of QGIS server is not as great as say GeoServer. But again, you have this additional features that you get with the one-to-one feature parity.
Yeah. So, okay, got it. And so what are the bottlenecks of QGIS as of now? Like what are things that you think are not as good as like it should be as of now?
I think there's definitely a need of more kind of focused development in certain areas. So for example, network analysis is something that I spend a lot of my effort in. And there are a lot of plugins that do a great job. But again, you can do a lot of these things that you can do in other software, but again, they are not as polished, not as well packaged.
Yeah.
So I think bringing all of this functionality into the core of QGIS will help a lot of people. And again, you can currently do it. I have many videos showing how to do this, but again, it's not as well packaged. So I think bringing that kind of package and polish to certain areas of application specific areas is definitely helpful. It just requires funding, somebody to fund the development, and you can use this. Another place is where QGIS is not very strong is raster analysis, and something that in QGIS is doesn't perform well. And earlier I used to think that QGIS should spend more time in developing more raster analysis tool on the desktop. But again, the way the world is moving is you should not be doing any raster data processing on your desktop at all. You have to process them in cloud. So you need to use the cloud native libraries and then use QGIS as a client for doing this. And there's already some work. There's a really good plugin called Stack API Browser, which allows you to load data from Stack catalog as a cloud native GeoTIFF into QGIS and do some analysis using that. So again, I think that's a way forward where you build those connectors to leverage all the cloud native computing systems within QGIS, and that will bring those capabilities to QGIS.
So yeah, so like this is where I also wanted to talk was about like raster data analysis, like because I also see that sometimes when you load when you load bigger data sets as like without any optimization, it becomes problematic. But that's the case with all other softwares as well. But one thing that I wanted to ask is, as you clearly mentioned that if we use any plugin, can we use that into the actions or into the Python script or no?
Yeah, remember I showed you the isochrone example that was using the code from the plugin.
Yeah, but okay, but the point is, for example, like let's say if I have my own Python package, right? I have so I've been working with GeoServer X, for example. Now what I want is whatever data I'm creating from there, I want to use GeoServer X package and then the methods and functions that I have in that package to execute. So like how exactly the environment thing works over
Yeah.
there
So
then.
how the packaging, essentially, how do you package your plugin to include that dependency? So there are a couple of things you can. One is you can include the dependency as a static dependency within the plugin itself. So embed the plugin code, can embed the GeoServer X library within your plugin itself.
But
And there are
but when
tools
you
to.
say embed, like do you mean like pip install or like how
Yeah.
exactly?
I forget what is the exact method, but there is a way to manage dependency. You just mention
Oh,
the
okay.
dependency, and when you
Okay.
package your plugin, it just downloads the latest version of a package and puts it inside your plugin. So there is no
Okay.
external dependency. So that is one way. If that works for you, say I'm going to ship my package along with the plugin. So user, when they install it, there's nothing else to do.
Correct.
Another one is you can trigger a pip install on the first run of the plugin. That's how many plugins do it, where you say launch a plugin, it looks for the package, it's not there. You can do a pip install of that particular Python package in the first run of the plugin. You can also do some auth if you need it. And once it's there, you can just run the plugin. So that's another way. But again, if it's a large plugin and the first time people install and launch it, they would wait for a few
Yes,
minutes for that
exactly.
plugin to install.
Exactly.
So again, two ways I've seen people do both. There are many plugins that follow even the pip install on the first launch, and you can do that as well.
Okay, great. I think that sums up to all the questions that I had. Thanks a lot for your time. We scheduled for 40 minutes, and I think it's more than an hour for sure now. But yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot for your time, and this has been a great session. Personally, I think after the call, probably first thing I will be doing is looking at the actions and then try to implement some of my Python code and try to see whether I can replace it. Uh, Apart from that, all of your contact information will be mentioned in the description, and all the links for your course will also be mentioned in the description. So yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.